poor diner owner sacrificed his meal for old couples. Next day, a millionaire knocked on his door. Have you ever walked past a little diner late at night? Seen the glow of its neon sign against the wet pavement? The kind of place that feels like a world unto itself? This is a story about one of those diners, and about a man named Elias Vance. The diner was called the Corner Spoon, and it was tired. You could feel it. The clock on the wall ticked a little slower than anywhere else. The vinyl on the booths was cracked with memories, and the bell above the door didn't so much ring as it gave a weary little jingle, like it was just too much effort. And in the center of it all was Elias. He was a man in his late 40s, but the worry lines on his face sometimes made him look older. His hands were strong from years of lifting pots and scrubbing grills, but his eyes were kind. Tired, but kind. The Corner Spoon was his whole world. It was his father's before him, and every chip in the plate, every scratch on the counter, was a chapter in his family's story. But lately, the story was getting hard to read. The city was changing around them. Big flashy restaurants opened up, and the little diner on the corner started to feel invisible. Elias would open the register, and the emptiness inside seemed to echo. He'd stretch a pot of stew to last 2 days, adding more water, more potatoes, praying it would hold out. This one evening, a slow, drizzly rain was falling, painting the streets in shades of gray and silver. Inside the Corner Spoon, the air was warm and carried the smell of old coffee and onions slowly cooking. Elias was wiping down a spotless counter, his movements slow and deliberate. It was a way to pass the time, to feel useful. On the back burner of the stove, a single pot simmered, a rich, hearty stew. That stew was more than just food. It was his anchor, his one meal at the end of a long, thankless day. He'd been looking at it for hours, watching the tiny bubbles break the surface, each one whispering, asterisk, just hold on a little longer. Asterisk. There were only 2 customers left. Old Ben from the auto shop and Maria, a nurse just coming off a double shift. They sat at the counter, stirring their coffees. Place is too quiet these days, Eli, Ben muttered, not unkindly. Maria nodded, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Everything's getting expensive. People are scared to spend. Elias just nodded, refilling their mugs. He heard them. He knew they were right. The fear was a constant knot in his stomach, tighter than any apron string. He could feel the weight of the bills in his pocket, the ones he was afraid to open. He watched the rain streak down the window pane. The blue neon of his sign bled into the water, a lonely pulse in the growing dark. 1 more hour, he thought. Asterisk, then I can lock up. Then I can eat. Asterisk. And then the door jingled, not with force, but softly, hesitantly. An elderly couple stepped inside. They were soaked through, their coats thin and worn. They stood there for a moment, just inside the door, huddled together like 2 birds in a storm. You could see the hesitation in their eyes. The man's collar was frayed. The woman's purse was clutched so tightly her knuckles were white. They didn't rush to a table. They moved slowly, carefully, to the corner booth where the light was warmest. They picked up the menus, and Elias saw it then. The look he knew all too well. It wasn't just deciding what to order. It was math. It was the quiet, heartbreaking calculation of what you can afford versus what you need. The diner fell silent. Ben and Maria stopped talking. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the soft tap-tap-tap of rain on the roof. Elias picked up his order pad, his heart starting to ache with a knowing dread. He walked over to their table, forcing a gentle smile. "What can I get for you folks tonight?" The old man looked up, and his eyes were filled with a shame that made Elias want to look away. The woman's gaze stayed fixed on the tablecloth. We're all right, the man said, his voice soft and raspy. Could we maybe have 2 glasses of water? The words hung in the air. Heavy. Final. From the counter, Elias heard a low sigh. He didn't know if it was from Ben or Maria, but it was a sound of understanding, a sound of shared hardship, and in that moment, Elias wasn't in the diner anymore. He was a boy of 8, sitting at his own kitchen table. He saw his mother, her back to him, stirring a pot of soup. She'd serve him a big, steaming bowl. "Eat up, my love," she'd say. And he never once saw her eat until he was finished. He never saw her take a bowl for herself. She would just smile and say she'd eaten earlier. It took him years to understand. She was hungry so he wouldn't be. That memory hit him like a physical wave. It washed over the fear, over the worry about the rent, about the bills. His feet were moving before his mind could catch up. He walked back behind the counter, his back to the room. His eyes landed on the pot of stew. His stew. The steam rose from it, carrying the scent of thyme and warmth and comfort. His stomach clenched, a sharp, painful reminder of his own emptiness. "This is foolish," a voice in his head hissed. Asterisk, "this is your food. You need it. You have nothing left to give." Asterisk. He looked over at the couple. The woman had reached across the table and placed her hand over her husband's. A simple, quiet gesture of love and shared burden. That was it. The decision was made. He lifted the ladle. He didn't hesitate again. He filled a large, deep bowl to the very brim. He found the last of yesterday's bread, warmed it quickly so it was soft again, and placed it on the side of the plate. He arranged it all on a tray with a care he usually reserved for his best customers. He could feel Ben and Maria watching him. He could feel their surprise. As he carried the tray across the diner, one of the teenagers who had come in earlier to escape the rain snickered. "Charity case," the kid whispered, just loud enough to hear. Elias ignored it. He placed the bowl of stew in front of the elderly woman. "Here you go," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "On the house." For a second, there was complete silence. The woman stared at the food, then up at Elias. Her eyes, old and tired, welled up with tears that she didn't let fall. Her lower lip trembled. "Son," the old man began, his voice choked. We can't." "You already have," Elias said softly. "Now please, enjoy your meal." He walked away before they could say more. He busied himself wiping the already clean counter, giving them their privacy. He didn't need to watch them eat to know what was happening. He could hear it, the soft clink of the spoon against the bowl, the small, almost silent sighs of relief, the sound of hunger being chased away, bite by bite. When they left, they stopped at the counter. The old man didn't say thank you. He just looked Elias directly in the eye and gave a slow, deep nod. It was a language men like them understood. It said more than words ever could. The door closed behind them with its tired jingle. The diner was empty now, except for Elias. The rain had softened to a gentle patter. He finally allowed himself to look at the stove. The pot was empty. The ladle was clean. The warmth that had been promised to him was gone. The reality of his choice settled over him. The hunger came back, sharper now, a hollow emptiness that seemed to fill his whole body. He cleaned the diner slowly, methodically. He wiped their booth, the cloth moving in slow circles. He stacked the chairs on the tables. Every movement felt heavier than the last. He turned off the lights, locked the door, and stepped out into the cool, damp night. The walk to his small apartment above the laundromat felt longer than usual. His room was dark and quiet. He didn't even bother turning on the light. He just sat on the edge of his bed, listening to the distant sounds of the city. His stomach growled, a loud, angry sound in the silence. He went to the kitchen and drank a full glass of water. Then another. It did little to help. He lay back in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The worry tried to creep back in. Asterisk, what about tomorrow? What will you stretch then? How will you make it? Asterisk. But then he pictured their faces, the tears in the woman's eyes, the firm, grateful nod from the man, and a strange feeling came over him. Yes, his stomach was empty, but his heart felt full. It was a feeling he hadn't had in a long, long time. It was the feeling of having done the right thing, the human thing. As he drifted into a restless sleep, the rain still whispering against his window, his last thought was the same one he'd had 1,000 times before. But this time, he believed it a little more. Tomorrow, he whispered to the empty room, tomorrow will be better. That night, sleep didn't come easy to Elias. It was a thin, restless thing, broken by the grumble of his own empty stomach and the sound of the rain that just wouldn't quit. He'd drift off for a moment, only to be pulled back by dreams of simmering pots that always stayed just out of reach. When the gray light of morning finally seeped through his blinds, it didn't feel like a new beginning. It just felt same. The same worry was waiting for him right where he'd left it. The hollow ache in his belly was a stark reminder of the choice he'd made. A good choice, a right choice, but a choice that left him feeling physically hollow. He dragged himself out of bed. The routine was the same. The splash of cold water on his face. The same worn jacket shrugged onto his shoulders. The quiet walk down the stairs, past the humming laundry machines, their steady rhythm a predictable comfort. He pushed open the diner's door. The air inside was still and carried the faint, stale smell of yesterday. He moved through the motions on pure muscle memory. Flick on the lights. The neon sign outside buzzed to life with its tired blue glow. Start the coffee. Oh, that first rich, bitter smell was a small mercy. He poured himself a mug black, no sugar. It wasn't food, but it was warmth. It was something to hold on to. He stood behind the counter, sipping his coffee, watching the world outside wake up. People hurried past, heads down against the damp morning, on their way to jobs and lives that seemed a world away from his own quiet struggle. The clock ticked. The coffee pot gurgled. The silence in the diner was so loud. He thought about the stew. He'd have to figure out something else for lunch. Maybe just soup. He could make a big pot of broth, stretch it with noodles. The math started again in his head. The familiar, tired calculations. Was it worth it? That little voice of doubt whispered again. You have nothing to show for it, but a hungrier morning. But then he saw them. The couple. The look in their eyes. The way the woman's trembling hands had steadied the moment she touched that spoon. The memory was like an ember, still glowing faintly in his chest, fighting off the chill of his doubt. He held on to that ember. It was all he had. The morning dragged on. A few regulars came in for a quick coffee to go. They nodded, threw a couple of dollars on the counter, and hurried back out into their day. The bell would jingle, and for a second, hope would flicker in Elias's chest. Maybe today would be the day it turned around. But then the door would close, and the quiet would settle back in, heavier than before. He was polishing the same spot on the counter for the 10th time when he heard it. A sound that was entirely out of place. Not the hesitant jingle of a customer. Not the sharp tap of the mailman with another bill. It was a knock. A firm, solid, deliberate knock on the glass door. Elias froze, the rag still in his hand. Who knocks on a diner door? The sign said open. He was clearly inside. He turned slowly, and there, standing on the other side of the glass, was a man in a beautiful, tailored gray suit. His shoes were polished to a shine, even though the pavement was still damp. His hair was silver and perfectly combed. He stood with a posture that spoke of boardrooms and authority, a world away from cracked linoleum and coffee stains. And next to him, holding his arm, was the elderly woman from the night before, Mrs. Albright. But she looked different. Her back was straighter, her eyes were clear, and she offered Elias a small, gentle smile. Confusion, then a flicker of worry, washed over him. Had something been wrong with the food? Had he overstepped? Had he accidentally insulted them with his charity? His hand was a little unsteady as he walked over and unlocked the door, pushing it open. The morning air, cool and fresh, swept inside. "Can I help you?" Elias asked, his voice rough with disuse. The man in the suit extended his hand. His grip was firm, sure. "Mr. Vance?" "Elias Vance." "That's me," Elias said, utterly bewildered that this man knew his name. "My name is Robert Thorne," the man said, his voice calm and measured. "This is my mother, Eleanor." Elias's eyes flicked to the woman. She gave him another warm smile. "Your stew was the kindest thing anyone has done for us in a very long time," she said softly. Robert Thorne's gaze swept over the diner. But he wasn't looking with judgment or disgust. He was looking with assessment. He saw the worn booths, the chipped counter, the aging equipment. He saw the struggle, but he didn't seem to see failure. "My parents," Mr. Thorne began, turning his keen eyes back to Elias, "are proud people. Recently, they've fallen on difficult times. They would never ask me for help. They would sooner go hungry." He paused, and his voice, when he continued, held a new, profound weight. "Last night, you saw that. You saw their need. And you offered your last meal without a second thought. My mother told me the story this morning. She insisted we find you." Elias just stood there, his mind reeling. He couldn't form a sentence. This was too much. Mr. Thorne placed a fine leather briefcase on the counter. He clicked the latches open with a precise, clean sound. Inside were not piles of cash, as some wild part of Elias's imagination had briefly pictured, but neat, organized documents. Contracts. Financial papers. "I am a businessman, Mr. Vance," he said, pulling out a single sheet. "I've built my career on recognizing value, and what I see in you is the most valuable asset any enterprise can have. Integrity. A heart that doesn't know how to look away from someone in need." He slid the paper across the counter towards Elias. It was a proposal, an offer of investment, a partnership. "This is not a handout," Mr. Thorne said firmly, as if he could read the protest already forming in Elias's mind. "This is an investment. I am investing in you, in your character. I will provide the capital to renovate this place, to settle its debts, to market it properly. And you will run it. You will be the heart of it. We will be partners." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The hum of the refrigerator, the drip of the coffee machine, the distant sound of traffic, it all faded into a muffled roar. Elias gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles turning white, afraid he might simply float away. Tears, hot and completely unexpected, welled in his eyes. He looked from the impossibly generous proposal to the kind, lined face of Mrs. Thorne, and then to her son's steady, sure gaze. All the fear, the years of worry, the lonely nights wondering if he could keep his father's legacy alive, it all gathered in his throat, a hard, painful knot. It was finally finally breaking apart. "Why?" was the only word he could manage to push out, a choked whisper. "Why would you do this?" Robert Thorne's expression softened. "Because the world is full of people who are smart, Mr. Vance. It is full of people who are shrewd, but it is desperately short of people who are genuinely selflessly good. You fed 2 strangers with your last bread. I believe that kind of spirit is worth investing in. I believe it's exactly what this world needs more of." The transformation of the corner spoon didn't happen overnight, but it felt like it. Within a week, contractors arrived. The cracked tiles were replaced with clean, new ones. The windows were washed until they sparkled. The tired old booths were reupholstered in a warm, cheerful red. A new, state-of-the-art coffee machine arrived, hissing and gleaming like a promise. But the real change wasn't in the furniture. It was in the air. The air itself seemed lighter, buzzing with new energy. Word spread. People came, curious at first, then loyal. They came for the new paint job, but they stayed for Elias's cooking, for his same, steady, kind smile. The diner was always full now. The sound of laughter and conversation, and the clinking of cutlery became its new music. The bell above the door jingled constantly, a bright, happy sound. Elias Vance was no longer just a struggling diner owner. He was a success. But if you walked into the Corner Spoon on any given day, you wouldn't know it. He still wore the same style of apron. He still wiped the counters with the same care. He still remembered what it felt like to have nothing. One evening, after the last customer had left, Elias stood in the middle of his bustling, beautiful diner. He looked around at the clean floors, the full tables, the happy faces in the photographs now pinned to the wall. He thought of that single bowl of stew. He thought of the empty, aching night that had followed. And he thought of the knock on the door that changed everything. He walked to the door and turned the lock. Outside, the streetlights glowed, and the world continued on its way. He leaned his forehead against the cool glass of the door, and a single quiet thought echoed in his mind. A lesson learned not from a book, but from life itself. Kindness is never a loss. It's a seed, and you never know when it's going to bloom. You just have to be brave enough to plant it, even when your own ground feels barren. Especially then, because sometimes the smallest act of giving can open a door you never even knew was there.